global handicrafts industry is almost $1 trillion. Our goal is to make it just as easy for you to support someone locally as it is for you to go to one of those big box retailers.
Hey everyone! Today we're sitting down with Jackie, the founder and CEO of LocalBy, empowering the local handmade goods industry.
Jackie has diverse experiences within the startup ecosystem, from lead PM at Location Labs to being a growth equity investor, then leading Google's internal incubator Area 120, and now founding LocalBy. Her experience on both sides of the table is really fascinating for us.
In our chat, Jackie showed her decade-long obsession with the consumer marketplace and her vision on the future of gig economy. So let's get started.
Let's get started.
So today we have Jackie from LocalBy with us. So Jackie, can you do a brief introduction to our audience about LocalBy and yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, local buy is a way for people to be able to find locally made things in their community by artists and crafters. You might be surprised. I live in San Francisco, and there's actually over 10,000 of those people in San Francisco. So they're everywhere, but they're really hard to find. And then a brief introduction about myself. I've worked in tech for almost 20 years now. I started out as a product manager at startups. I've done investing. I've worked in big tech at Google, at their internal incubator, and now I'm doing this company. I'm really
Yeah,
excited to chat with you
wonderful.
guys.
One quick follow-up question on the story behind how you come to this idea of local
Oh,
buy.
yeah. There were 4 things that happened that sort of all came together. The first thing is very personal, which is that I have always loved handmade things. I'm a
Mm.
maker myself, and I was trying to find a cutting board, and I couldn't find anyone locally who made cutting boards, so which is crazy. And so I ordered one from Latvia, and it came, and it was beautiful, and I unwrapped it in front of my neighbor, and my neighbor was like, "You do know I'm a master woodworker, right?" And I could have made this for you. And I was like, "No, Larry, how would I know that?" And he was like, "Oh, well," and it was all word of mouth. Like he does it like another job part time. He's not really discoverable in Google Maps. And I just thought about how invisible that solution was for me as a user. And then when I was at Google, there was this convergence of a couple of things that had me very interested in this space. One was I was seeing technology coming down the pike that was going to be really, really helpful for the type of product discovery that happens when you're looking for a unique good. The second thing that happened is that Etsy's really changed their focus. And that's not a bad thing at all, but it just means that there's now, I think, an opportunity to really serve the true long tail individual makers. And the third thing that happened is of that set is that the pandemic happened, and that led to massive digital transformation in this space. So the number of makers that are accepting digital payments in the United States has grown by 3x in 5 years. And that's because of the pandemic. They couldn't go to craft fairs and they needed a way to make money. And on the consumer side, you had people who expect everything to be available from their phone. And craft fairs are sort of the last bastion of that. And over the pandemic, people got comfortable with ordering handmade goods through their phones.
Awesome. So, one question about your career, because you went from startup to being investor, and then went back into being a corporate, I guess, incubator at Google, and now you're being a founder. So, what motivated you on each step of the career switch? Do you find it easier or harder throughout the process?
I don't know about you guys, but I find it really frustrating how there's this idea of like a very polished timeline for like and then all of this led me to this moment as a compelling founder. And I really appreciate it. Steve Jobs gave the commencement speech at my undergrad when I was there. And he had this thing where he talked about like a calligraphy class that he took when he was like 19, ended up influencing like the fonts at Apple. And he didn't know that at the time. Everything makes sense when you look backwards and you can make a story about it. So I'll just pause there and say, like, the story I'm about to like get into is messy. It's not like I was super strategic and everything built to where it is now. Right out of school, I needed to make money, and I knew that venture capital was a good sign that a company had money to hire people. So I looked at a couple venture capital sites that at the time were like the most well-known VCs and looked in their portfolio and saw who was hiring and got a job at one that ended up doing really well. and I led product there. So after that, which is me winning the lottery, then I had a lot of options in my career. So I think talking about like that first choice after college is like an interesting thing for us to kind of riff on. And then the other thing I'll say is that for every move in my career, I've thought more about what skills don't I have that I want to have, and who do I want to serve? And those two things have, yeah, guided every decision I've made.
I absolutely love your story of authenticity, especially because we are also right now pretty early career trying to map out, but it's a different kind of view when you are trying to map out going forward versus you're looking back. I love the different opinions right there. What is your experience being a founder versus an investor? How do you think about it?
Oh, I love that question. There's this quote that's like often attributed to Warren Buffett that's I'm a better businessman because I'm an investor, and I'm a better investor because I'm a businessman. And I really believe that with going back and forth. It's such a shame because I really do think that at a certain point you get kind of crystallized and like it's hard. I was in growth investing. That's really hard to transition out of and then go back into and go back and forth. But especially early on, I think having experience as an operator for sure made me better at Dragoneer, the investment group I was at. And then my experience there, where we invested in a lot of marketplaces like Airbnb, Uber, Instacart, seeing those up close, even though I'd worked at a marketplace before, but seeing how they became so successful really then made me a better builder. And ultimately, what we're building with LocalBuy is a marketplace. So to me, that exchange is really valuable. And I think I'm better at each of those things because I've bounced back and forth on them. For people that are just starting out, I think there's this idea that like you can't be an investor unless like you're with a venture capital firm, and it's so competitive, and especially right now with the economy, like no one's hiring in VC. I got my start as an angel investor, and angel investor at the time, I could write like $1,000 checks, and those counted as names in my portfolio. I also think that there's a lot of stuff out there like WeFunder, where you're doing like fractional ownership, where like you can have really small amounts of money, but you're still thinking like an investor and putting some money behind your conviction. And a lot of people don't realize that that's a way you can build your book without
Right.
needing access to a firm. So I just kind of want to put that out there.
Yeah. Well, I guess I just kind of want to follow up on that because it's something that I've been considering. So, how do you get access to those, I guess, investment deals, say in a syndicate, and how do you evaluate the fit, I guess, for both, whether that's a good company or if that fits into your investment criteria as angel?
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you how I did it, and it might be different than how you guys are approaching it. It's not the way. And also, I'll say what I wish I did when I was in college. Um, so the way that I approached it was after I went to business school in particular, I did some early checks when I was really young. And in fact didn't realize you had to be an accredited investor in order to do checks. So then realized that a lot of those checks were like not above board. So remember to be an accredited investor. And then your alpha on deal flow, which is kind of what early stage is about, it's the people that you know. So I think it's really easy for us to like look at our friends and be like, find the problems with what they're doing because you know your friend really well. You like think the business seems kind of dumb, but like that's it's so easy to tear down ideas. And I really think that supporting the people that you trust is a really good place to start. Um, and usually this isn't make or break money where it's going to like compromise your relationship to the person when you're just starting out. These are like small checks where you're just saying, I support you. And I actually think
Yeah.
that founders supporting founders through this kind of like circle of small checks is like a really neat way to go. If you have communities that you're active in, it definitely uplifts the entire community by sort of doing this circle of investing. Um, so that's one thing that I wish I'd done a lot earlier. Like I went to school with some incredible founders. like friends who, started like Instagram or DocSend, like these amazing companies. Like I knew who they were. I knew they were smart. I knew that they were hardworking. They had like all the things that you needed. But we just put founders up on this like mythical pedestal where we expect them to be so perfect that it literally, I think, makes people like extra hard judge the people they already know.
Yeah. By the
Yeah.
way, Jackie went to Stanford. That's where the story begins.
That is
Yeah.
true. And there's definitely some privilege baked into that of like, of course, being at Stanford in like the mid 2000s was like this amazing place to be. But I also work with first generation college students at UC Merced, and the thing that they're missing is not brilliance and it's not hustle and it's not a good idea. The thing they're missing is capital. Like that's the thing that I think is like hard for founders to find. And then what's unfortunate is then I think capital gets misallocated,
Yeah.
honestly, to people with elite backgrounds. It's like viewed as a rubber stamp. Um, so I think even if you're not in a place like Stanford, I think if you have someone who's trying to make something happen and they're smart and they're hardworking and you think they're a good person, like that's a really great place to start for your first couple checks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
how do you find about your experience as external investor versus in when you are at Google's being the director of Area 120, being within a bigger company and an internal incubator? Do you see the difference very significantly?
So for me, I just love innovation and I love making new things. When I was getting my MBA, I spent my summer internship actually working at Corning, which is a people think of them for like glass ceramic ware, but actually they invented fiber optic cable. They make a piece that's in every catalytic converter in the world. They make the glass on your smartphone. They basically take sand and then innovate, which is incredible. And I went and worked there because I was so used to thinking about innovation in a software sense. I wanted to see how it was different in a different setting. And that's like as different as you can get from software. And what it made me realize, and this is like such a no brainer now, but that the way that you create something new is so different depending on where you're at in the ecosystem. And there's like 1,000 different approaches to creating something new. And I think when you make it not the goal of I want to make something new, but a goal of like, here's the kind of problem I want to solve, then you can use all these different tools of what's the right system to solve that problem. So, for example, I went to Google because I was really interested in how entrepreneurship worked in a corporate setting and how do you create new lines of business when you have like the most durable business model in the world. And there are definitely some differences between that at Google versus in the like VC founded scape. Inside of corporate incubation, you usually really know like what matters at the company. Like, how do we make our money? What are existential threats to us? It's pretty focused. You also already have a lot of in-house talent that's like very credible. I remember meeting with someone who does innovation at Lindt, with the
Mm.
chocolate company.
Yeah.
And like they already have people that know how to do like chocolate manufacturing. They know how to do chocolate sourcing. So you have a lot of internal expertise. In VC, you should kind of be hopefully if you're doing something, you're the expert on that. You know more than anybody in the room. In corporate, you actually have a lot of other people that are usually experts on the thing. What you don't have that you have in VC is that there's a whole system in VC around capital allocation and around, at least on the surface, saying that they're really okay with risk. And so fail fast. Whereas at a company like Google, you had to show return on investment pretty quickly and
Yeah.
make sure it was obvious how it was aligned to company strategy. I will say that something that kind of bums me out about the state of VC right now is
Yeah.
that things have become so professionalized that that thing that I consider an edge in VC, which is wild ideas that may not work, or making a bet on a founder who's really passionate about a space. Even now, like I just went through my pre-seed fundraise. When
Yeah.
I do my seed round for a marketplace, I'm going to need to be launched in like all 50 states.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to need the kind of traction that like I remember if you look at Uber's very first deck, when they raised their pre-seed, they hadn't done any rides. Their pre-seed was about buying cars in order to do black car rides. And so we just the level of data that we now want very early efforts to have in VC honestly really mirrors how strict corporate is. But with corporate, like
Right.
you're not trying to swing for a home run. Like you usually can't build that business up to be like a $50 billion business. So I actually think VC has some interesting challenges in the future because of how data oriented and quantitative even pre-seed and seed has
I
gotten.
mean, that reminds me of a book I read recently about more on the secondary market, on how people try to be as quantitative as possible. And the author was from coming from a quant background, but he's like, all the data might not be true. So you actually have to dig into the business and know what's not in the data to get an
I love that
edge.
you said that. I think about this a lot. I think about how little accountability there is,
Yeah.
especially in early stage. Diligence is fast. I have heard so many stories of people, especially at AI companies, because
Yeah.
they have incredible pressure on them, where they would ask questions about their revenue model. Tell me, break it out for me how you're making this money. And it falls apart. It's not real. And some of that is on unethical conduct by the teams, but some of that is on incredible pressure in the system right now to show results in a very
Yeah.
narrow period of time, I
Right.
think.
I mean, it's about, I guess, striking a balance between having a pain point and looking for technology to solve that point, or have a solution ready and look for the needs, I guess. But yeah, I guess the balance kind of shifted toward the former, where like, oh, we just want to show the results. And then going back onto that, maybe talk a little bit about the value chain of local buy, and what are the value add in the handmade good industry, because a lot of our, I guess, listeners are from mostly tech industry, so not so familiar with that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So like I said, this is an industry that I grew up in. I would buy vintage clothing as a teenager and then take it apart and dye it or change the pattern on it and then resell it first to my friends and then to consignment shops and then online through eBay. I think maybe taking a step back, what surprises people is that global handicrafts industry is almost $1 trillion. There's 300 million makers around the world, and you can kind of split them up into who their end buyer is. There are a lot of people, especially in the developing world, who uh, essentially are makers for then retailers. Like Anthropology carries a lot of handicrafts, for example. West Elm carries a lot of handicrafts. However, about 20% of this market are true solopreneur makers. So in the United States, for example, alone, there's 17 million of these people that individually are making goods. Many people think that they're making these goods like in a studio and then boxing them up and selling them on Etsy. And that's a very small part of this market, actually. About 10% of this market is online sales, like through Etsy. About 20% is wholesale, which is, for example, how Fair became a $14 billion startup by realizing that wholesale was a bigger market than online sales. But about 53% of revenue in the United States is actually through local individual sales. So craft fairs, flea markets, farmers markets, buying from your friends, stuff on Facebook Marketplace. Usually they have like a couple of jobs. Remember, gig economy is going to be the majority economy in the United States in just a couple of years. The part that's tricky is for buyers like you and I to find those people, and for those people, it's actually really hard for them to get in traditional channels to sell. Like craft fairs are really competitive to get into.
Yeah. Can you walk us through the process of how to use local buy?
Yeah, for sure. We talk about local buys sort of like Etsy meets Facebook Marketplace from the consumer experience side. So you're at home, you're on your couch, you want to buy like a cool piece of jewelry or you want to buy a gift for someone in your family. And our goal is to make it just as easy for you to support someone locally in your community and find their stuff as it is for you to go to one of those big box retailers like West Elm or Anthropology and buy from them online. And unlike an Etsy, which is global and it's pretty hard to figure out who's local, it can take a long time to get stuff shipped to you because of that. You're on your couch, you find an item that you like, you press buy, and because it's local, usually you can get it the next day if it's in their inventory. Or you can do a back and forth with the seller and have it custom made. And then as soon as it's made, you can get it. You are seeing the maker making the items. You can really understand the quality of what they're doing, that personal connection, which is hard to get on Facebook, for example. And then you're getting it immediately because it's in your community.
And how do you see AI being part of like solution to that? Because you mentioned about customization and these like logo contributing. So I imagine maybe there's some algorithm out there that can help.
So there's this concept of like a fuzzy search. And in this industry, really common is someone has a high intent to buy, but they have a low specificity of what they're looking for. So,
Right.
like the old internet is built to really help you find like a size 34 black Calvin Klein belt. That's what it's great at doing. But it's not really good at taking you from I want something cool for my house or I want to get a gift for my mom for Mother's Day. It's not great at taking that and then giving you a really personalized result and helping you find like the one unique special thing. And that's where, for example, LLMs, particularly like a multimodal LLM, is really helpful. The canonical example we're using right now, because Mother's Day is coming up, is I'm looking for a gift for my mom. And then we'll go back and forth using RAG or retrieval augmented generation to go back and forth between asking questions about, well, what does your mom like? And querying our database to see if we have things that might be a fit, and then asking, what do you think of this thing in our database? You put 10 different people through that flow and you get 10 wildly different answers. Like one of them that we had recently was someone said, well, my mom really likes NASCAR and craft beer. And you would never get a recommendation list for Mother's Day where the top recommended item is a coaster for craft beer that has little vintage NASCARs on them. You'd never get that. For this person whose mom likes NASCAR and beer, that was like a dream find for them. So that's one way that, particularly for this market, this change in how we're discovering information is really powerful.
Yeah, following up on that, from my current work, we're into e-commerce right now, but the focus is more on discovery to buying a thing that you never thought of you would be buying versus the old way of, oh, I thought about buying, let's say, a bottle, and then I search for it, and it might be a fuzzy search kind of, I don't know what exact bottle that I want, but I want a bottle. In this specific market, do you see that coming to a more popular way of discovering new things and then, oh, I actually like this style versus what I thought of?
Absolutely. I think as a founder, something that we have to really nail is focus. Yes, for sure. How do you have like a browsy experience where people are delighted, they find things serendipitously and they just want to get it? What you just said, I totally agree. It's a part of commerce. But we're doing this other part first. And frankly, one of the reasons we're doing it first is that it's a really concrete problem to solve. People who aren't working in this space, like if you're a reporter or frankly, even a lot of investors, because they have to be an expert on so many things, it makes sense. There's this idea that all this stuff is like ready to commercialize. All this technology works perfectly and beautifully. I think, as you probably know, because you're actively building these experiences, the stack for this kind of stuff is like it's not super there. You'll still get really weird results. So I love the conversation around like what could be possible and what are all the neat ways to solve user problems. But I also just want to give some weight to the fact that many of these problems that we're talking about, like on Medium, they are still really early. This is like talking about like using GPS on your phone for like turn by turn navigation in like 2006. I just want to honor the fact that like it's not snap your fingers and it's just there. We're
Right.
actively like building the raw materials to do a lot of the stuff that we're talking about.
Right.
So
Fantastic.
let's say if we can choose one highlight and one low light so far with LocalBy, how would you describe that?
Oh, yeah. For me, because I come at it from a model of who do I want to serve, it's a real highlight to be serving this community that I really care about. Like humans have been putting like little glass beads in their hair when they're buried like 30,000 years ago. Like having beauty in our lives to me is what really makes us human. And there's so many different ways to create beauty. What's beautiful to me maybe isn't what's beautiful to you, and getting to see these makers create things that are really special and unique, that's a real highlight because the world I want isn't a world of like, throwaway stuff that you wear once and goes into
Yeah.
landfill and isn't treasured. I want a world where people make beautiful things. So to be in that every day is a real highlight. For me, the low light is that our environment has waves of what's hot and what's not. If you were building like a virtual reality thing in 2015, or if you were building a crypto thing in like 2017, or now if you're building like capital AI, like now
Yeah.
is your time, big hype cycle moment. And a lot of valuable companies are created in each of those hype cycles, but it is really tough to be in a contrarian space, which means that on one side, I don't have a lot of competition. But on the other side, a lot of time has to be spent on explaining this market and why it's interesting. I would say maybe half, this is like me being very honest. I would say about like half of the investor conversations that I had when we were just doing our pre seed were them being like, but wouldn't you rather build this tool for us? Because our team is like very capable at creating. They're like, wouldn't you rather build this widget for us that we really want built that is capital AI? And
Mm.
I think that's something where, as a founder, you want to work on something that you're going to give 1,000% of yourself to, and you could work on that problem for a long time. You have to get extra grooved at telling the story of it and trying to get people to care about it.
Yeah.
Right. I think just to like comment on that, I think there's a clear distinction between alpha and beta. And what we see, I guess, in the market is that a lot of people are just riding the beta without creating much alpha. But it's only with these contrarian bets that you are able to generate alpha, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah. And I
And
and I just want to acknowledge that like there's so many valid reasons to do it, to do your own company. Maybe other people aren't like as focused on serving a population. Maybe the thing that they really want to do is they really love the mechanics of scaling a business. And so they're more flexible in what they work on. And that's totally, there's like 1,000 different reasons that are valid reasons to start a company. So I'm not at all taking away from that approach. Um,
right.
it's just not my reason for starting a
Right.
company.
Yeah. So what is your goal with LocalBy in 5 years?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's 300 million people around the world who make this stuff. My goal is that for you, whether you are in your hometown or you get off the plane when you're on vacation, that just like you would open Google Maps to like see what are restaurants that are like nearby, I want to make it just as easy for you to know what you can buy locally and have those beautiful special items fill your home. And I want people all around the world to do that and makers all around the world to make a good living making their craft.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank
Mm.
you. So, what would you do if you're not doing this?
Something that I feel a lot of tension between is it's really fun to do this early stage. And also, it was really fun, like at Location Labs when we got pretty big, or like at Google when it was like a 200-person org. You are lucky when you get to that level of scale. But if you're starting a company each time, it takes a while for you to get there. So if I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, maybe I would be doing something at a different part in like the size of company, like a company that's like, oh no, like how do we're now like 1,000 people. How do we grow from there? Because it's just a skill set that I'm not using at all right now that is also really fun and I like using. But I think I enjoy this quite a bit and I'll be doing this for a while longer.
Yeah, pretty soon you will have a huge team and then
Yeah.
you can use that side of you. So,
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah,
that's the
great.
plan. Yeah.
So if you can get someone as say advisor or just someone to build together, who would that be?
Well, first of all, I've been like super lucky to have awesome advisors, people who were like early at Etsy or early with Fair. I think that's something I've been really privileged on and really thankful for. The primo, most talented crafters in the United States are showcased at the Smithsonian Craft Show, which happens in May. And I would so love to talk to the people who run that. Um, they're in DC. It's a little different than what we're doing right now. I don't know anybody who does that, but the if anyone's listening who's involved with the Smithsonian Craft Show, I'd really love to nerd out with you. Also, the CEO of Michael's, the craft store, they just started something called Maker Place. They're clearly thinking about how to serve makers locally too, and they have 1,300 stores. and I'd really love to just build that for them. So those are my two, the CEO of Michael's and the people who run the Smithsonian Craft Show.
Great, wonderful. That's all our question. Thank you so much for being here today, Jackie.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as financial or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the information presented. This podcast is not an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any financial instrument. Thank you for subscribing and see you again soon.